what happened is a lot of the homeless were living out in the forest, and then they said they can't do that anymore. So they came into town and they needed to figure out what to do. And so, so they gave them a parking lot, and then they put together these small, tiny homes that were on wheels. And they leased from the city $1 a year, the parking lot, and they really didn't think it would succeed, and it ended up being highly successful. But the reason, one of the huge success factors is their governance. They had the homeless people actually on the board and governing what took place. And so I've got a handout with a few of those things, and I know that you also have a handout about what you're doing in North Carolina. I know that tiny homes is really, I think, the future in many ways. We have our city of Pasadena is considered overhoused. So what that means, it's way too many people, way too much house for the population in our city. And there's many cities that are overhoused. So we're trying to figure out how to house our population and lower the number of people, or raise the number of people within those homes. So I could talk for hours about all this stuff. I love policy. I've been working a lot on policy. Some of the things earlier that you heard on the tour, remember when we were at East LA Community Housing, or Community Foundation, Community Development. They were the ones that did the Mariachi Boyle Hotel. And so they talked about how they created a community plan. Remember him talking about, they actually initiated and created their own community plan. And so that's part of what I'm doing in Pasadena and North Fair Oaks. We're creating a community plan. We're ahead of the game. We're telling the city what we want as a community. And we're doing the same thing with something that's called second units. So there's a state law in California called AB 1866, and that was passed in 2002, and it essentially rezoned the entire state of California, saying that anyone that has a single-family home can build a second unit in their backyard. And so it's a huge opportunity, but it also said that cities could create a local second unit ordinance to give guidance to that. So my particular city, Pasadena, created a horrible ordinance that tried to make it almost impossible to do. So we're working on creating a plan. I've got a Fuller intern from Fuller Seminary. He's been doing research, looking at where those second units are in the city, and we're going to do a comparative analysis between a neighborhood that has a high percentage of second units and a neighborhood that has almost no second units. The very similar neighborhoods that have the same property values, same number, same crime, same everything, and income levels. And see if there's really any impact. That's the thing in our city, that they don't believe there's an impact. We're doing other community-based research around anti-camping ordinance that our city is doing. But these are great things that youth groups can do. I could talk for hours telling you some really awesome things that churches can do to help address the housing crisis. But I don't want to take any more time. I just want to give you a taste. These are $20. How much are your books, Tom signed? 20. Okay. So if you want to come up and just give us a little bit about what you're doing. You guys have been awesome. Great to be with you today.
Wasn't this a remarkable good news day with all the tough news in our world? I can't remember spending a day encountering so much good news in one place. All of you ready to move to LA? Seriously. And so what I'm going to ask Jensen to do is share some good news. But first of all, how many of you are under 35 or under 40? Okay? You are the good news generation. You are the good news generation. And let me explain. You guys are much more aware of the economic, racial, environmental injustice in the world because you are the first digital generation. And all over the world, there are millennials and their younger brothers and sisters, Gen Z, that are creating and launching new things. Tomorrow night, 5 to 6 in the San Pedro room, before CCDA gets started, we're going to talk about how you can build a bridge in your church to invite the ideas of the young people who are still in the building and the ones in the neighborhood. It's entitled, the same as the book, Live Like You Give a Damn, Join the Change-Making Celebration. And you guys are a part of the celebration. What I want to do is introduce you to one of my heroes who is a millennial. And we just presented, have you heard of the Wild Goose Festival in North Carolina? Well, Jensen is an interesting young man. He's just finished a degree at Olon University in social enterprise. And he didn't have enough to do his last semester, so he got in touch with Lowe's Hardware. Do you know Lowe's? And he got them to fund him building a tiny house that he drove 300 miles to the festival, and that was our presentation site. Now, he's just a serial entrepreneur. He started a nonprofit when he was a sophomore. He's got plans for several other social enterprises, but he's going to tell you about, in terms of the housing that we visited today, his idea in North Carolina for a tiny house village of 20 units. Please welcome him. He does great work, and he's a part of your new generation of hope and new possibilities. Good on you guys. Enjoy.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to Jill and everyone else who has been involved with putting this on. I think the tour has been extremely eye-opening and just exciting to go back into our communities and get involved with the different interests that we have. So as Tom mentioned, I studied social entrepreneurship, and during my time at school, also became interested in tiny houses. And I have a really hard time understanding something unless I'm very involved with it. So I started building a tiny house. And on the flyer that I passed around, you should be able to see a couple images of the tiny house that I'm working on now. And it's not fully completed, but it's in the works. So in building that, I found all these folks were coming up to me and saying, wow, I can't believe you're doing this. Have you been watching the TV show? It's so cool, all this different stuff. And the main demographic that a lot of these homes were going to were folks who could afford a $60,000 to $80,000 tiny house as their second, third, fourth thing to get involved with. And I was seeing it as something that could be done very affordably and something that could be a living opportunity for others in the community. So I'm coming from Burlington, North Carolina. I know some of you know where that is, but most of you probably don't. The county is 160,000 people, and so it's a little bit smaller than LA. But we have a lot of really cool things that come along with that. So because it's a smaller community, it's really a lot easier to work with the government there. And so we have taken and really learned a lot from the currently existing tiny house communities around the country. So the one that was mentioned earlier in Oregon, there's a few popping up in Texas. There's some already existing in North Carolina, but a majority of these, as Jill was mentioning, have not been able to be within city limits. They've been pushed into the country, and so as you're looking at doing quality affordable housing, the second you push that into the country, you have less access to the things that are needed for these individuals. Transportation, healthcare, job opportunities, all these different things. So we have been working really hard in Burlington, North Carolina to work with the currently existing zoning and the different building codes and everything, which many of you are very aware of, are outdated in all of our states. I think in North Carolina right now we're currently functioning with the 2012 building codes, as we're still working on the 2016 building codes that will be implemented in 2040. But what's exciting is even within these current building codes, things can be done, and within the current zoning, things can be done. So right now, if you turn over the flyer, we've come up with a little design for 10 acres. And so that was our first design that we came up with. It would home 20 units. There's a square dot that you can see, not a dot, but a square image there, where we're looking at building a community center, and that would be made out of different shipping containers. So you'd have about 5 shipping containers there, with a roof coming off that would be created into a community center. The tiny homes will all be created out of units similar to the one, similar to the style that was used to build the building we were in, I think 3 or 4 visits ago, that they were talking about having shipped those in as already formed units. It will be very similar, so that way we can move those units very easily, and if we wanted to drive those somewhere, we would have that opportunity. So, like I was saying, what's neat about that is it gives some versatility to what we can do. Right now, if you're looking for quality affordable housing, you're probably going to be in a building lesser than the ones we got to see today. I think we've gotten to see some of the best situations probably in this city, which is amazing. But for those of you who have worked in the field a little bit, you know that there's a lot worse out there, and a lot of folks who get stuck in those settings. So we want to create a program where folks can afford the place they're living, and as they're paying rent in those areas, they're actually starting to build equity within that home, and at the end of a certain amount of time, they would be able to own the tiny home itself, take it from that piece of property and take it somewhere else if they'd be willing to, or to sell it back to us, or continue living in the community that we're creating. And the goal or the vision behind this is to be able to house folks coming out of incarceration, folks coming out of homelessness, folks that are in a transitional phase of life where they are either out of a job, out of housing for some type of reason, and need that stepping stone into the next phase of life. So we're providing a space where they can go and afford an untraditional next step in life. In many cases, you're moving into a home where you might not be able to afford that, but in this setting with a tiny house, you would have the autonomy, you'd have the kind of flexibility to have your own kitchen, your own bathroom, and your own bedroom. And that's something that we feel is really important, and we want folks to be able to have, but we also want them to be able to build up a goose egg as they're living there. So when they leave, they can sell that and really put their first down payment on a house, or to invest in their transportation that they need to get to work, or whatever it may be. So a lot of the different things that are working against this movement right now are zoning, building codes, and just individuals who aren't interested in these happening in their backyard. A big movement right now is not in our backyard against tiny houses. And so we're working with that. I would encourage many of you to look into, if you're interested in tiny houses at all, look into kind of the different things happening in that environment right now. I think that it's getting to a place where folks realize that they can't ignore it anymore, that tiny houses are something that's really coming down the pipeline. And so when we went to our government in Burlington, we expected them to really push us away, but they were excited. They brought us in. They started talking to us about strategies, about how we could work within the existing code, how we could work within the existing zoning, and that really wasn't something we expected. So we've been working with an architect who has been telling us time and time, you know, wait before you go before the city. Don't you dare say anything about tiny houses, call it something else. And the second that we sat down before the city, they said, yeah, there's no problem with zoning. We're going to work with you on this. We just need to be able to make sure we can fit within the building code. So I had a really negative outlook on what that was going to be like, and maybe not being able to move forward with this, but we found out that there is some light at the end of the tunnel, and as I think code and inspection moves forward, this will get better, and as more and more people see this as a viable option, it will become more and more of something that takes off. And I don't think it's necessarily the answer to LA's problems, but for many of our cities around the country where families are moving to for walkable towns and different things like this, I think it's a really neat option for an alternative way to live. So some of the exciting things that I just want to highlight are that it's a rent-to-own model. So that way we are allowing the different residents to gain equity in that. We have almost an off-the-grid system. The only thing that we're really going to be attached to, because we're within city limits, is the sewer and then drinking water. But all of the community gardening, the running paths, the parking structures, the buildings, all of that will be functioning into one unit where the solar, the wind, the water, everything will be coming from the land and being given back into the land. So we're really excited about the opportunity to create a system that feeds itself, both with energy and with the food on the land. So, and then the last thing is that we're within city limits. It's so important that we have folks that can walk downtown and then get the different services from the community. So the reason I'm here sharing this with you is onefold. It's exciting. It's really cool that we have this new alternative living structure that's starting to take off. The second one is we need folks who continue to push it forward, because I don't want it to be something that happens in Eugene and Austin and a few places. I think that it's something that needs to be happening around the country, and it needs to be an option for so many different people, because you can build these for $20,000 is kind of like a medium level of quality. You can build them lower and higher than that, and they can be built to code, and they can be a really viable living solution for folks. And I realize that they're not for everybody, and some folks might never want to live in a space that small, but for someone who's coming off living on Skid Row in a tent, it might be that next step they need to get into their dream living situation. So I'll wrap up, and I'll take questions just individually after this. I know we want to eat, and there's other folks who need to talk, so I'll take questions after. But I just want to thank Tom. I want to make sure that you get a chance to check out his book. I've had a chance to read through it. He's going to be doing a book signing tomorrow at
Friday.
Oh, Friday.
Friday at the Putterette.
The plow.
The plow booth.
The plow booth.
Yeah,
So
they did a segment of the book, so I have a copy of this segment. But the book is all about something we'll talk about tomorrow at 5 o'clock tomorrow, San Pedro room. I'll talk about how our churches can become incubators. We're inviting those of you that are under 35 for your ideas. Have you ever been to a church that asks young people for ideas? We want to help churches discover what you've got to offer and help you identify problems, create new solutions, and help you launch. So anyway, so if you want to come for the church part tomorrow night, 5 o'clock, San Pedro room, just before the conference gets going.
yeah, so again, thank you so much. It's been a really long day, so I appreciate you giving me your attention for a few minutes. And I'm just so excited to hear all the different things that all of you are involved with, and looking forward to staying in touch with you and hearing about the different successes you have around the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Jensen. We all need to be visionaries like Jensen. That's awesome. So small is beautiful, right? We need to start with those little mustard seeds and make them grow.